The quicker you get the brush out of the wax and onto the wood will help determine how smooth or rough your texture is. So if you want it to be smooth, you want your wax to be as hot as possible, and you have to move slowly across the flat surface because you want all the little holes to get filled in with that hot wax. So if you go really fast, you're just gonna get a bunch of bumps and it's gonna make texture. So you take your wax and you just move really slow, and it's gonna leave the smooth texture. You have to do layer after layer after layer. This wax right here, there's maybe 200 layers of wax, 200 brush strokes. The transparency of the wax depends on how much of the pigment you put in, and then it also depends on how many layers you put on there. I pigment my wax with oil paint. And I try, when I do my smooth textures, I go both directions with it because otherwise you get a line in the middle. After I do 4 or 5 layers of wax, I will go ahead and do this again because then that adheres that base layer to the next chunk. If you heat too much and you're trying to get a rough texture, your texture is going to go away because it's wax. So if you heat it too much, it's not going to be there anymore. If you have a texture that you really don't like, you just melt it away and it's smooth again. That's the joy of this particular medium. The next texture that I'm going to show you is little tiny beaded texture, like what's on this piece. This tiny texture here, which you can see is very different from this texture. These tiny little bumps, this makes the piece a little more fragile, but they look so cool. Those are some of my favorite parts of the pieces that I do. Tiny texture happens when you move the brush really fast and you let it cool off a little bit, because the wax starts to roll on itself and it adheres to that bottom layer because it's a little bit warmer than the bottom layer. So it adheres to it and those little balls end up on there, and then you just build on those like you would a candle, kinda. So I always wipe off my brush pretty good and I just go really fast, all different directions. If you go the same direction for the whole thing, you're gonna end up with lines of texture instead of random texture. And when you build up pretty good layers of it, you can start to slow down when it starts to build enough. Because if you go too fast and the wax is too hot, it's gonna melt that texture down. So you have to be very conscious of the speed of your brush. Earlier I talked about determining your background color from the beginning. You can see in here where that clear coat, that's gonna be there unless you fill in all those little teeny tiny holes. So your background color is important. It becomes part of your piece. So that's really the only color I ever determine from the beginning. Everything else is just whatever I pick up when I do my work.